The autumn rain hammered against the floor-to-ceiling windows of the Ashford Grand Resort, one of Virginia's most exclusive luxury destinations. Inside, the lobby gleamed with polished marble floors, crystal chandeliers, and the muted elegance that only serious money could afford. The air smelled of expensive cologne, fresh orchids, and the subtle arrogance of the ultra-wealthy. Among the guests gliding through the corridors in designer clothes and $1,000 shoes, there moved a shadow, silent, nearly invisible. Her name was Maya Thornton, and to most people at the Ashford Grand, she might as well have been part of the furniture. Maya was 28 years old, though the exhaustion etched into her dark brown eyes made her look older. She was thin, too thin, her black uniform hanging loose on her small frame. The fabric was worn at the elbows, the white collar slightly yellowed despite her efforts to keep it clean. Her hair was pulled back into a tight bun, not a strand out of place, and her movements were careful, deliberate, as if she were trying not to take up space in a world that had made it clear she didn't belong. She'd worked at the Ashford Grand for 3 years. 3 years of scrubbing floors, changing sheets, emptying trash bins filled with half-eaten caviar and champagne bottles that cost more than her monthly rent. 3 years of being looked through, talked over, and treated like she was nothing. And she'd learned to accept it. "Room 407 needs fresh towels," barked Mr. Gerald Patterson, the head concierge, a balding man with a perpetual scowl. He didn't look at Maya when he spoke to her. He never did. "And make sure you fold them properly this time. Mrs. Whitmore complained last week." "Yes, sir," Maya whispered, her voice barely audible. She grabbed the linen cart and pushed it toward the service elevator. Her shoulders hunched as if she were bracing against an invisible wind. As she passed a group of guests chatting near the grand staircase, one of them, a woman in a fur coat, wrinkled her nose and stepped aside as if Maya carried some contagion. Maya pretended not to notice. She'd gotten good at pretending. That evening, the Ashford Grand was hosting its annual Autumn Gala, a black tie event that attracted tech moguls, real estate tycoons, and trust fund heirs from across the East Coast. The ballroom had been transformed into a glittering palace of gold and white, with cascading floral arrangements, a live orchestra, and tables laden with delicacies most people would never taste in their lifetime. Maya wasn't supposed to be anywhere near the ballroom. Her job was to stay in the shadows, to restock the restrooms, refill hand towels, and make sure the wealthy guests never had to experience even a moment of inconvenience. But tonight, they were short-staffed. One of the servers had called in sick, and Mr. Patterson had pulled Maya from her usual duties. "Just keep your head down and don't talk to anyone," he'd warned her, thrusting a serving tray into her trembling hands. "You're invisible. Got it?" "Yes, sir." So Maya entered the ballroom, her heart pounding, her hands gripping the tray so tightly her knuckles turned pale. The room was dazzling, too bright, too loud, too much. Laughter echoed off the high ceilings. Champagne flutes clinked. Diamonds sparkled on wrists and throats. And then she saw them. 4 young men, seated at a corner table near the bar, already several drinks deep. They were in their late 20s, maybe early 30s, dressed in custom-tailored suits that probably cost more than Maya's car. Their laughter was sharp, cruel, the kind of laughter that came easy to people who'd never known consequence. Their names, though Maya didn't know them yet, were Brendan Calloway, Chase Harrington, Dylan Mercer, and Trent Ashford Jr., the resort owner's son. Brendan spotted her first. His eyes, cold and pale blue, locked onto Maya as she moved past their table, trying to be invisible, trying to disappear. "Hey!" Brendan called out, his voice loud enough to cut through the music. "You, server girl." Maya froze. Her pulse spiked. Slowly, she turned toward them, keeping her gaze down. "Yes, sir?" Brendan leaned back in his chair, swirling his whiskey glass. "Get us another round, top shelf, and make it quick." "Of course, sir." Maya nodded and started to turn away. "Wait," Chase interrupted, grinning. He was handsome in the way that money could buy. Perfect teeth, perfectly styled hair, a tan that came from winters in the Maldives. "What's your name?" Maya hesitated. "Maya, sir." "Maya," Chase repeated, drawing out the syllables like he was tasting something amusing. "That's cute. You work here full-time?" "Yes, sir." Dylan leaned forward, elbows on the table, his smirk wide and mocking. "Full-time, huh? Bet you're making bank." The others laughed. Maya's throat tightened. She didn't respond. She couldn't. Trent, the quietest of the 4 but no less dangerous, studied her with the detached curiosity of someone examining an insect. "You look nervous," he observed. "Relax. We don't bite. Brendan chuckled. Not unless you spill our drinks. He winked at the others and they erupted into laughter again. Maya felt heat rise to her face, not anger but shame. Deep, burning shame. She hated how small they made her feel. I'll get your drinks, she stammered, backing away. Good girl, Brendan called after her, his tone dripping with condescension. If you're enjoying this story and want to see what happens next, please take a moment to subscribe to our channel and hit the notification bell. Your support helps us keep creating these powerful stories. Thank you. Maya retreated to the bar, her hands shaking as she relayed the order to the bartender. She could still hear their laughter even over the orchestra. It felt like every eye in the room was on her, even though she knew that wasn't true. No one ever really looked at her. When she returned with the tray of drinks, 4 glasses of 25-year-old scotch, she approached their table carefully, setting each glass down with practiced precision. There you go, gentlemen, she said softly. Brendan picked up his glass, examined it, then looked at her with mock disappointment. This doesn't look full enough. Maya blinked. I'm sorry? I said, Brendan repeated slowly as if speaking to a child. It doesn't look full. He tilted the glass, and before Maya could react, he poured half of it onto the polished marble floor. The amber liquid spread in a slow, gleaming puddle. Oops, Brendan said, his eyes never leaving hers. Looks like someone made a mess. Better clean that up. The other 3 laughed. Loud, vicious, delighted. Maya stood frozen, her tray still in her hands, her mind screaming at her to move, to say something, to do something. But she didn't. She just lowered her gaze, set the tray down, and knelt to the floor. And as she knelt there, wiping up the spilled whiskey with a cloth from her apron, the 4 men above her laughed and clinked their glasses together, celebrating their cruelty like it was a sport. Maya's vision blurred with tears she refused to let fall. She told herself what she always told herself. It's okay. It's just a job. It'll be over soon. But deep down, in a place she tried hard not to visit, she wondered how much more of this she could take. The humiliation didn't end with the spilled whiskey. Maya finished cleaning the floor, her knees aching against the hard marble, and rose slowly to her feet. Her uniform was damp where the liquid had soaked through. The smell of expensive scotch clung to her hands, her apron, her dignity. She picked up her tray and turned to leave, but Brendan's voice stopped her again. Hold on, Maya, he said, drawing out her name like it was a punchline. We're not done with you yet. She turned back, forcing herself to meet his gaze for just a second before looking down again. Yes, sir? Brendan gestured to Chase, who was scrolling through his phone with a bored expression. My friend here has a question for you. Chase glanced up, a lazy smirk spreading across his face. Yeah, I do. He leaned back in his chair, arms crossed. So, Maya, how much do they pay you to do this? Maya's throat went dry. I'd rather not say, sir. Come on, Dylan chimed in, his voice mockingly sweet. We're just curious. What's the going rate for? This? He waved his hand vaguely at her as if she were an object to be appraised. Trent said nothing, but his cold eyes were fixed on her, studying her reaction like she was a lab specimen. Minimum wage, Maya whispered finally, her voice barely audible. Plus tips. Brendan barked out a laugh. Tips? Who the hell tips the cleaning lady? The others joined in, their laughter sharp and cutting. A few nearby guests glanced over but quickly looked away. No one wanted to get involved. No one ever did. Maya stood there, trapped in the spotlight of their cruelty, her hands trembling at her sides. She wanted to run. She wanted to scream. She wanted to tell them exactly what she thought of their entitled, privileged, soulless selves. But she couldn't, because she needed this job. She needed the money. And she'd learned long ago that people like them always won. You know what? Chase said suddenly, pulling out his wallet. He extracted a crisp $100 bill and held it up between 2 fingers. I'll give you this if you do something for me. Maya's stomach twisted. What? What do you need, sir? Chase's grin widened. I want you to tell everyone in this room that you're grateful to be working here. Loud enough so they can all hear you. The table erupted in laughter again. Maya's face burned. Please, sir, Come on, Chase pressed, waving the bill. $100 for 10 seconds of work. That's more than you make in a day, right? Dylan leaned forward. Do it. Say, I'm grateful to serve the rich and powerful guests of the Ashford Grand Resort. Trent finally spoke, his voice quiet and cold. Say it like you mean it. Maya looked at the $100 bill. That money could pay for groceries for 2 weeks. It could cover the late fee on her electricity bill. It could buy her a little breathing room in a life that left her gasping for air. But even as she considered it, Something inside her, something small and stubborn, and still unbroken, whispered no. I can't, she said softly. Brendan's smile vanished. What? I said I can't. Maya's voice was steadier now, though her hand still shook. I'm sorry, sir, but I can't do that. For a moment there was silence. The four men stared at her with expressions ranging from surprise to anger, to something that might have been respect, though it was gone as quickly as it appeared. Then Brendan stood up, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. He was tall, broad-shouldered, and used to getting his way. He stepped closer to Maya, close enough that she could smell the alcohol on his breath. You think you're too good for us? He asked quietly, his voice dangerous. No, sir, Maya whispered. You just what? Brendan interrupted. You think you have the right to refuse us, to disrespect us? Chase stood up too, followed by Dylan and Trent. The four of them formed a loose circle around Maya, blocking her escape. The ballroom's cheerful music suddenly felt obscene, a mocking soundtrack to her nightmare. You're nothing, Brendan continued, his voice low and venomous. You understand that? You're a nobody. A poor, pathetic nobody who cleans up after people like us because that's all you're good for. Maya's vision blurred. She bit down on the inside of her cheek, using the pain to keep the tears at bay. She wouldn't give them the satisfaction of seeing her cry. Look at her, Dylan said, circling around to her side. She's about to cry. How sad. Maybe she needs a reminder of where she stands, Chase suggested. He reached out and flicked the collar of her uniform. Nice outfit, by the way, very stylish. I'm sure it cost all of what, $10? Trent's voice was the quietest, but somehow the cruelest. People like you exist to make people like us comfortable. That's your purpose. That's all you'll ever be. Maya's breathing was shallow now, her heart racing. She felt like she was drowning, suffocating under the weight of their words and their presence and the horrible, inescapable truth that they were right, at least in this moment. In this place, they had all the power, and she had none. Now, Brendan said, his tone shifting back to mock friendliness. Why don't you run along and get us some more drinks, and this time try not to mess it up? Maya nodded mechanically and turned to leave, her legs feeling like they might give out at any moment. As she walked away, she heard Chase call out, Hey, Maya! She paused but didn't turn around. Don't forget, you're invisible. That's what you do best. Their laughter followed her all the way to the bar. In the resort's staff break room, tucked away in a dim corridor far from the glittering ballroom, Maya finally let herself collapse. She sat on a battered folding chair, her face in her hands, her body shaking with silent sobs. Carla Rodriguez, another housekeeper, and one of the few people at the Ashford Grand who treated Maya like a human being, found her there 10 minutes later. Mija, Carla said softly, kneeling beside her. Carla was in her 50s, with kind eyes and calloused hands. She'd worked at the resort for 15 years and had seen everything. What happened? Maya couldn't speak at first. The words were lodged in her throat, tangled up with shame and anger and exhaustion. She finally managed, her voice breaking. They humiliated me. In front of everyone. Carla's expression darkened. Who? 4 men. Young, rich. One of them is Mr. Ashford's son. Carla closed her eyes and let out a long breath. Trent, she said quietly. I should have known. She placed a weathered hand on Maya's shoulder. Listen to me. Men like that, they think they can do whatever they want, and most of the time they can, but that doesn't make it right. I just want to disappear, Maya whispered. I want to be anywhere but here. I know, Mija, I know. Carla squeezed her shoulder gently. But you can't let them break you. You're stronger than you think. Maya shook her head. I'm not strong. I'm nothing. They said so themselves. They're wrong. Carla's voice was firm now. You hear me? They're wrong. Before Maya could respond, the break room door swung open and Mr. Patterson appeared, his face red with irritation. Thornton, he snapped. What are you doing in here? You're supposed to be on the floor. She's on her break, Carla said, standing up to face him. Her break was 5 minutes ago. Get back out there, both of you. Maya stood on shaky legs, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. Yes, sir. As she moved toward the door, Patterson grabbed her arm, not hard enough to hurt, but hard enough to make his point. And Thornton, whatever happened out there, I don't want to hear about it. Keep your head down and do your job. We clear? Maya pulled her arm free and nodded, not trusting herself to speak. The rest of the evening passed in a blur. Maya moved through the ballroom like a ghost, refilling water glasses, clearing plates, avoiding eye contact. Every time she caught sight of Brendan or his friends, her stomach churned. but they seemed to have grown bored with tormenting her. They'd moved on to other entertainment, flirting with equally wealthy guests, taking selfies near the champagne fountain, treating the entire event like their personal playground. By 11 o'clock, Maya's feet ached and her head throbbed. She'd been on her feet for 14 hours straight, and all she wanted was to go home, crawl into bed, and forget this night had ever happened. She was gathering empty glasses from a table near the terrace doors when she heard raised voices outside. Curious despite herself, she edged closer to the doors and peered through the glass. Brendan, Chase, Dylan, and Trent were standing on the terrace, smoking cigars and laughing about something. As Maya watched, Brendan pulled out his phone and started recording. "This is going on Instagram," he announced. "4 kings living their best life at the Ashford Grand. Say something inspirational, Trent." Trent took a long drag on his cigar and exhaled slowly. "If you're not at the top, you might as well be at the bottom. There's no middle ground for winners." They all laughed and clinked their glasses together. Maya felt something cold settle in her chest. These weren't just cruel men, they were dangerous. They saw the world as a hierarchy, with themselves at the peak and people like her so far below they didn't even register as human. She turned away from the terrace, her jaw tight. "They're wrong," she thought, echoing Carla's words. "They have to be wrong." But deep down a voice whispered back, "What if they're not?" It was nearly midnight when the gala finally began to wind down. The orchestra played its last song, and guests started filtering out toward the lobby, where valets were already bringing up their cars. Teslas, Maseratis, Bentleys. Maya was in the ballroom service hallway loading dirty dishes onto a cart when she heard footsteps approaching. She didn't look up, assuming it was another staff member. "Still working hard, I see." She froze. That voice. Brendan. She turned slowly. He was standing alone, his tie loosened, his eyes glassy from too much alcohol. Behind him, the hallway was empty. "Sir?" Maya said quietly, taking a small step backward. "The event is over. You should—" "I wanted to apologize," Brendan said, cutting her off. His words were slightly slurred, but his gaze was sharp. "For earlier, we were just having fun, you know? No hard feelings?" Maya didn't respond. Every instinct she had was screaming at her to run. Brendan took a step closer. "You're really pretty, you know that? In a humble kind of way." "Please leave me alone," Maya said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'm trying to be nice here," Brendan said, his tone shifting. "The least you could do is be grateful." He reached out toward her, and Maya flinched back so violently that she knocked into the dish cart, sending several glasses crashing to the floor. The sound seemed to break whatever spell had held them both. Brendan blinked, looked at the broken glass, then back at Maya. For just a second, something flickered in his eyes. Shame, maybe, or fear. Then it was gone. "Clean that up," he said coldly, and walked away. Maya stood among the broken glass, her heart pounding, her hands shaking so badly she could barely grip the broom she grabbed to sweep up the mess. "This can't be my life," she thought desperately. "This can't be all I am." But what else was there? What else had there ever been? At 1 a.m., Maya finally clocked out. She changed out of her ruined uniform in the staff locker room, pulling on worn jeans and a faded jacket. Her reflection in the mirror looked hollow. Dark circles under her eyes, her hair limp and lifeless. She looked exactly like what those men had called her. Nobody. She left through the service entrance, stepping out into the cold Virginia night. Rain was still falling. Lighter now, but steady. She didn't have an umbrella. She never did. As she walked toward the employee parking lot, a muddy patch of gravel hidden behind the resort's manicured gardens, she passed by the main entrance. The 4 men were still there, waiting for their cars, laughing and joking like nothing had happened. Like she'd been nothing more than a momentary inconvenience. Maya kept walking, her head down, invisible once again. But as she reached her car, a battered 15-year-old Honda Civic with a dented bumper and rust spots on the doors, she paused. She looked back at the resort, at its gleaming lights and marble columns and the people who lived in a world she would never be part of. And for the first time in 3 years, she let herself feel something other than resignation. She felt anger, small and fragile but real. It wouldn't change anything, she knew that. Tomorrow she'd come back, put on her uniform, and be invisible all over again. But tonight, just for a moment, she let herself be angry. And somewhere in the back of her mind, a thought formed. Small and impossible, but persistent. What if there's more to my story than this? She had no way of knowing that in less than 24 hours, that question would be answered in a way she could never have imagined. Maya didn't sleep that night. She lay in her small studio apartment on the outskirts of Richmond, staring at the water-stained ceiling while rain drummed against the single window. The apartment was barely 400 square feet, a kitchenette with a broken stove, a bathroom where the shower only produced cold water, and a sleeping area that consisted of a mattress on the floor and a plastic dresser from Walmart. It was all she could afford. The anger she'd felt in the parking lot had faded during the drive home, replaced by the familiar weight of exhaustion and hopelessness. She'd replayed the night over and over in her mind. Brendan's cruel smile, Chase's mocking voice, the feeling of kneeling on that cold marble floor while they laughed. You're nothing, a nobody. By the time dawn broke gray and cold through her window, Maya had convinced herself that nothing would change. This was her life. This was all it would ever be. She dragged herself out of bed at 6 a.m., showered in frigid water, and pulled on a clean uniform from her tiny closet. As she buttoned the white collar, she caught sight of herself in the cracked mirror hanging on the wall. The same hollow eyes stared back at her, the same defeated posture, the same invisible girl. She grabbed her keys and left for work. The Ashford Grand Resort looked different in the morning light, less glamorous, more stark. The rain had stopped, leaving everything wet and glistening. Maya parked in the employee lot and walked through the service entrance, nodding to the security guard who never bothered to learn her name. In the staff locker room, she found Carla already there, tying her apron. "Morning, mija," Carla said gently. "How are you feeling?" Maya managed a weak smile. "I'm okay." Carla studied her face, clearly not believing her, but she didn't push. "Listen, I talked to some of the other girls last night. What those men did to you, it's not right. We could file a complaint." Maya's stomach clenched. "No, please, Carla, don't. I need this job." "But, please." Maya's voice was barely a whisper. "They're powerful, they're rich, nothing would happen to them, but I'd lose everything." Carla's expression was pained, but she nodded slowly. "Okay, but if they bother you again?" "They won't," Maya interrupted. "People like that, they've already forgotten I exist." She said it with certainty, but even as the words left her mouth, she felt a small stab of something that might have been hurt. Even her suffering wasn't memorable enough to last. The morning shift passed in its usual monotony. Maya cleaned rooms on the third floor, stripping beds, scrubbing bathrooms, vacuuming carpets. The work was mindless, which was both a blessing and a curse. It gave her time to think, but thinking only led her back to the same dark places. Around 11 a.m., as she was restocking towels in a supply closet, she overheard two other housekeepers talking in the hallway. "Did you hear about the Callaway party last night?" One of them said. Jennifer, a blonde woman in her 30s who'd always treated Maya with casual indifference. "The trust fund kids?" The other replied. Sandra, who'd worked at the resort even longer than Carla. "What about them?" Apparently they were bragging on social media about putting some staff member in her place. One of them posted a video, but it got taken down. Still, people are talking. Maya's blood ran cold. They'd posted about it. They'd made her humiliation public entertainment. "That's disgusting," Sandra said. "Which staff member?" "Don't know, but whoever it was probably deserved it. You know how some of these girls get uppity." Maya felt like she'd been slapped. She pressed herself against the wall of the supply closet, willing herself to be invisible. Truly invisible this time. "True," Jennifer agreed. "Anyway, I heard Trent Ashford's hosting another party tonight at his penthouse suite. Same crowd. Should be wild." They moved on, their voices fading down the hallway. Maya stayed in the closet for several minutes, her hands pressed against her stomach, fighting the urge to be sick. "They're celebrating," she thought. "They humiliated me and they're celebrating." At lunch, Maya sat alone in the staff cafeteria, picking at a sandwich she'd brought from home. The room was half full of other employees, servers, housekeepers, kitchen staff, all caught up in their own conversations and complaints. She was invisible here too. As she ate, her mind drifted, not forward to the rest of her shift, but backward, to a life that felt like it belonged to someone else, to a time when she hadn't been invisible. Maya reached into her pocket and pulled out something she rarely looked at, a small worn photograph protected by a plastic sleeve. The edges were yellowed, the image faded, but she could still make out the figures clearly. A younger version of herself, maybe 10 years old, standing next to a tall, elegant woman with the same dark skin and high cheekbones. Both were dressed formally, Maya in a white dress, the woman in a tailored suit. They were standing in front of what looked like a government building, American flags visible in the background. Maya's thumb traced over the woman's face. "Dr. Elizabeth Thornton," Her mother, the woman who'd been a decorated surgeon, who'd served in conflict zones, who'd been nominated for humanitarian awards. The woman who died when Maya was 15, leaving her completely alone in the world. Maya closed her eyes against the sting of tears. Her mother would be ashamed of what she'd become. Dr. Thornton had been fearless, brilliant, respected. And her daughter? Her daughter cleaned toilets for people who saw her as less than human. She tucked the photograph back into her pocket and stood up, throwing away the rest of her uneaten sandwich. Some legacies, she thought bitterly, were meant to die. The afternoon shift brought Maya to the resort's administrative wing, where she was tasked with cleaning the executive offices. This was considered a privileged assignment. The offices were cleaner, quieter, and usually empty by this time of day. She was vacuuming the hallway outside Mr. Ashford Sr.'s office when she heard voices inside. The door was slightly ajar, and though she knew she shouldn't eavesdrop, something made her pause. "Disappointed in you, Trent." That was Mr. Ashford's voice. Deep, authoritative. He was in his 60s, a self-made real estate mogul who'd built his empire through ruthless business practices and careful image management. "Dad, I told you, it was just harmless fun." Trent's voice was defensive. "We were letting off steam." "Harmless?" Mr. Ashford's tone sharpened. "You posted about it on social media. Do you have any idea how that looks? We're trying to secure that deal with the Henderson Group, and here you are acting like a spoiled fraternity boy." I deleted the post after it had been shared 50 times. There was a pause, then a heavy sigh. "Trent, I've given you everything. This resort will be yours someday. But you need to learn discretion. You can't just abuse the staff publicly. It's bad optics." Maya's hands tightened on the vacuum handle. Bad optics. Not, it's cruel or it's wrong. Just bad optics. "Fine," Trent said sullenly. "I'll be more careful. See that you are, and stay away from that girl." "What's her name, the one you and your friends were bothering?" "Maya something. Thornton, I think." "Thornton," Mr. Ashford repeated slowly, as if testing the name. "That sounds familiar." "She's nobody, Dad. Just a maid." There was the sound of papers shuffling. "Well, regardless, keep your distance. We don't need any lawsuits." Maya quickly moved away from the door, her heart pounding. She returned to her vacuuming, but her mind was racing. Mr. Ashford thought her name sounded familiar. Why would that be? By 6 p.m., Maya's shift was finally over. She changed out of her uniform, exhausted down to her bones, and headed for her car. The parking lot was emptying out as the day shift left and the evening crew arrived. She was unlocking her door when she heard footsteps behind her. "Maya!" She spun around, her heart leaping into her throat. Brendan Calloway stood a few feet away, his hands in his pockets, looking almost sheepish. In the gray evening light, without his friends around him, he looked younger, less threatening. But Maya's body still went rigid with fear. "What do you want?" she asked, her voice steadier than she felt. Brendan ran a hand through his hair, a gesture that seemed genuinely nervous. "I wanted to apologize for last night. We were drunk, and we took things too far." Maya stared at him, searching his face for sincerity. All she found was discomfort, not remorse, but the awkwardness of someone who'd been told he'd behaved badly and needed to make it right. "Okay," she said flatly. "Apology noted. Can I go now?" "Look, I know you probably think I'm an asshole. I don't think about you at all," Maya lied. That seemed to surprise him. His expression shifted, something like offense flickering across his features. "I'm trying to make amends here." "Why?" Maya asked, genuine curiosity cutting through her fear. "Why do you even care?" Brendan hesitated. "Because my father suggested it would be the right thing to do, for the family reputation." There it was. Not guilt, not empathy, just reputation management. Maya felt that small flame of anger flicker to life again. "Your apology is noted," she repeated coldly. "Now please leave me alone." She got into her car and slammed the door, locking it immediately. Through the window she saw Brendan standing there, looking confused and slightly offended, as if he couldn't understand why his gracious apology hadn't been received with gratitude. Finally, he shook his head and walked away. Maya sat in her car for several minutes, her hands gripping the steering wheel, before she allowed herself to start crying. Not from sadness this time, from rage, from the unfairness of a world where people like Brendan could destroy her and then expect forgiveness, not because they felt genuinely sorry, but because it was convenient for them. She wiped her eyes roughly and started the car. Tomorrow would be the same. And the day after that. And the day after that. This was her life. This was all it would ever be. But Maya was wrong. Because at that very moment, 200 miles away in Washington, D.C., Colonel Marcus Reeves was sitting in his office at the Pentagon, reviewing a file that had just been flagged by the Department of Defense's personnel tracking system. The file contained a single name, Maya Elizabeth Thornton, and a notification that had been automatically generated after remaining dormant for 13 years. Status change detected. Immediate attention required. Colonel Reeves picked up his phone. "Get me a helicopter," he said, "and find out exactly where Maya Thornton is, right now." Across the desk from him, Dr. Patricia Nguyen, Director of Special Operations, leaned forward. "Are you certain it's her?" "DNA match is 99.8%, Reeves confirmed, his eyes scanning the file. "And the circumstances." He paused, his jaw tightening. "Dr. Elizabeth Thornton made us promise that if anything ever happened to her, we'd look after her daughter. We failed. For 13 years, we failed. She disappeared off the grid," Dr. Nguyen reminded him. "No social security activity, no tax records, nothing. How are we supposed to?" "She was working under a false identity," Reeves interrupted, holding up another document. "Using her father's last name, Jordan, until 3 years ago. Then she switched back to Thornton. That's when the system should have flagged her, but somehow it didn't until now." "Why now?" Reeves's expression darkened. "Because someone ran a background check on her. Someone powerful enough to trigger a military-grade alert." He stood up, grabbing his jacket. "I don't care what time it is or where she is. Dr. Thornton saved 37 lives during her last deployment, including mine. Her daughter should have been taken care of. She should have been protected. And instead," he gestured angrily at the report that showed Maya's current employment status, her poverty-level income, her complete lack of support system. "Instead, she's been invisible." "Not anymore," Dr. Nguyen said quietly. Reeves's voice was firm. "Not anymore." Maya arrived home just after 7 p.m. She climbed the narrow stairs to her apartment, fumbled with her keys, and stepped inside. The apartment was dark and cold. She hadn't paid the heating bill yet. It would have to wait until her next paycheck. She dropped her bag on the floor and collapsed onto her mattress, not bothering to change clothes or turn on the lights. Her phone buzzed. A text from Carla. "You okay, mija?" Maya typed back, "I'm fine. See you tomorrow." She wasn't fine, but what else could she say? As she lay there in the darkness, exhaustion finally pulling her toward sleep, she thought about her mother, about the woman who'd been strong and brave and everything Maya wasn't. "I'm sorry, Mama," she whispered to the empty room. "I'm so sorry I couldn't be like you." Outside her window, the first stars were beginning to appear in the clearing sky, and far above, a military helicopter was already en route to Virginia, carrying answers to questions Maya didn't even know she should be asking. Her life was about to change forever. She just didn't know it yet. The next morning arrived with cruel normalcy. Maya's alarm blared at 5:30 a.m., dragging her from a restless sleep filled with fragments of nightmares, Brendan's mocking laughter, the feeling of cold marble against her knees, her mother's disappointed face fading into shadows. She silenced the alarm and lay still for a moment, staring at the ceiling. Every muscle in her body ached. She felt like she'd aged 10 years in the past 48 hours. But bills didn't pay themselves. She forced herself up, went through the motions of her morning routine, and drove back to the Ashford Grand Resort. The building loomed ahead of her like a beautiful prison, all gleaming windows and manicured grounds, hiding the ugliness that happened in its shadows. As she walked through the service entrance, Bobby, the security guard, actually looked up from his phone. "Morning, Maya," he said, which was unusual. Which, Bobby had worked there for 5 years and had maybe spoken to her 3 times. "Morning," she replied cautiously. "You doing okay?" he asked. "I heard some guests gave you trouble the other night." Maya froze. "Who told you that?" Bobby shrugged. "Word gets around. Just wanted to say those rich kids are assholes. Don't let them get to you." It was perhaps the kindest thing anyone at the resort had said to her in 3 years. Maya felt her throat tighten. "Thanks, Bobby." He nodded and went back to his phone, the moment of humanity already passing. But it was something, a small reminder that she wasn't completely invisible. The staff meeting that morning was led by Mr. Gerald Patterson, as always. He stood at the front of the break room, clipboard in hand, his expression perpetually irritated. "Listen up, everyone," he announced. "We have a VIP situation tonight. Mr. Trent Ashford Jr. is hosting a private event in the penthouse suite. Top-tier guests, which means top-tier service. I need our best people on this." Maya kept her eyes down. praying he wouldn't assign her to that event. Rodriguez, you'll oversee catering. Stevens, you're on bar service. Mitchell, you'll handle housekeeping prep. Patterson's eyes scanned the room and landed on Maya. Thornton, you'll be on standby in case we need additional support staff. Yes, sir, Maya said quietly, relief washing over her. Standby usually meant she'd be kept far away from the actual event. And let me be clear, Patterson continued, his gaze sweeping over all of them. I don't want to hear about any incidents. No complaints, no drama, no problems. These guests are extremely important to the resort. You will be professional, courteous, and invisible. Understood? A chorus of yes, sir filled the room. As they dispersed to their assignments, Carla pulled Maya aside. You're not going near that penthouse tonight, she said firmly. I don't care what Patterson says, those boys have done enough damage. It's fine, Maya assured her. I'll probably just be restocking supplies on the lower floors. But even as she said it, a knot of anxiety formed in her stomach. The thought of Brendan, Chase, Dylan, and Trent partying above her, celebrating their wealth and privilege while she scrubbed toilets below, made her feel physically ill. The day crawled by with agonizing slowness. Maya cleaned rooms, changed linens, scrubbed bathrooms. Around 3 p.m., while she was restocking a supply closet on the 5th floor, she overheard 2 front desk clerks gossiping near the elevator. Did you see the guest list for tonight? One of them said. Ashley, a young woman who always wore too much perfume. It's insane. Tech CEOs, hedge fund managers, even some minor celebrities. Trent really knows how to throw a party, the other replied. Derek, who'd been at the resort for 6 months and already acted like he owned the place. I heard they're flying in sushi from Japan and champagne that costs $5,000 a bottle. Must be nice to have that kind of money, right? Meanwhile, we're making $12 an hour and dealing with their entitled attitudes. They laughed and moved on, their voices fading down the hallway. Maya closed the supply closet door and leaned against it, taking deep breaths. $5,000 for a bottle of champagne. That was more than she made in 2 months, and they'd probably drink it without even appreciating it just because they could. The unfairness of it all pressed down on her like a physical weight. By 6 p.m., the resort's energy had shifted. Maya could feel it. The heightened tension, the increased activity. Servers rushed through hallways carrying trays of expensive hors d'oeuvres. Managers barked orders. The penthouse elevator was restricted, requiring special keycard access. Maya stayed on the 3rd floor, as far from the action as she could get, methodically working through her checklist of rooms. But every so often she'd hear laughter echoing from somewhere above. Young, carefree, thoughtless. The sound made her want to scream. Around 7:30, her radio crackled to life. It was Patterson. Thornton, report to the service corridor outside the penthouse. We need someone to handle towel service for the pool area. Maya's heart sank. Sir, I thought I was on standby. Plans changed. Get up here now. She had no choice. The penthouse level was a different world. The hallways were wider, the lighting softer, the air scented with expensive cologne and fresh flowers. Maya could hear music thumping behind the heavy double doors, something electronic and bass-heavy. She reported to the service corridor where Jennifer was organizing supplies with barely concealed stress. About time, Jennifer snapped. Take these towels to the pool deck. And for God's sake, don't make eye contact with anyone. Just drop them off and leave. Maya took the stack of pristine white towels, her hands trembling slightly. Is there a back entrance to the pool area? No, you have to go through the main suite. Of course she did. Maya steeled herself and pushed open the service door. The penthouse suite was massive, easily 3,000 square feet of marble floors, floor-to-ceiling windows, and furniture that probably cost more than her entire apartment building. The space was packed with beautiful people in expensive clothes, holding crystal glasses, laughing and talking over the music. Maya kept her head down and moved quickly toward the glass doors that led to the outdoor pool deck. She was almost there when she heard a familiar voice. Well, look who it is. She turned slowly. Brendan Calloway stood near the bar, drink in hand, that same cruel smile on his face. Chase, Dylan, and Trent were with him, all dressed in designer casual wear that probably cost thousands of dollars combined. Didn't think you'd show up tonight, Maya, Chase said, his tone mockingly friendly. Come to serve your betters again? Several nearby guests turned to watch, their expressions ranging from amused to curious. Maya's face burned. I'm just delivering towels, sir. Excuse me. She tried to move past them, but Dylan stepped into her path. Not so fast, he said. We were just talking about you, actually, weren't we, guys? We were. Trent confirmed, his cold eyes studying her. Specifically, we were wondering why you're still working here after. Well, after everything. After we exposed you for what you are, Brendan added, taking a sip of his drink. Nothing. Nobody. Invisible. The words hit Maya like physical blows. But this time, instead of shrinking away, she felt something different rising in her chest. That small flame of anger from before, now burning brighter. "Excuse me?" she said again, her voice stronger this time. "I have work to do." She pushed past Dylan, who made an exaggerated show of stepping aside. "Such dedication," he called after her. "That's what I love about the help. They never give up, no matter how pointless it is." The others laughed, and Maya heard glasses clinking behind her as they toasted to their own cleverness. She made it to the pool deck, an impossibly luxurious space with a heated infinity pool, underwater lighting, and a view of the Virginia countryside that would have been breathtaking if Maya had been able to see through the tears blurring her vision. She set down the towels with shaking hands and stood there for a moment, gripping the edge of a lounge chair, trying to compose herself. Just get through tonight, she told herself. Just survive. But at that exact moment, 20 miles away, Colonel Marcus Reeves was in a Black Hawk helicopter, approaching the Ashford Grand Resort at high speed. Sitting beside him was Dr. Patricia Nguyen and Captain James Torres, head of military security protocols. All three of them looked grim. "ETA 3 minutes, the pilot announced through the headset. Reeves checked the file in his hands one more time, though he'd already memorized every detail. Maya Elizabeth Thornton, 28 years old. Daughter of Dr. Elizabeth Thornton, who had served with distinction in 3 combat zones before dying in a helicopter crash 13 years ago while evacuating wounded soldiers. What the file didn't show, what nobody knew except the handful of people with the highest security clearance, was that Dr. Thornton hadn't just been a surgeon. She'd been part of a classified medical research program, developing breakthrough treatments for combat trauma. Her work had saved hundreds of lives and had implications for civilian medicine that were still being explored. Before she died, she'd made one request, that her daughter be taken care of, protected, given opportunities. And the military had failed her. Through bureaucratic incompetence, through Maya disappearing into the foster system under a different name, through sheer terrible luck, the promise had been broken. Until 3 days ago, when a routine background check triggered an alert that finally brought Maya back onto their radar. What they'd discovered had made Reeves's blood boil. Maya Thornton, daughter of a hero, legacy of brilliance, was working as a housemaid, living in poverty, completely unaware of her mother's true contributions or the debt the country owed to her family. "Sir," Captain Torres said, pulling Reeves from his thoughts. "Are you certain we shouldn't have contacted her first? This approach might be shocking." "We tried calling," Reeves replied. "Her phone's been disconnected. We tried her apartment, she wasn't there. According to our intel, she's at work, and given what we learned about incidents at this resort." His jaw tightened. "She needs to be extracted. Tonight." Dr. Nguyen nodded. The background check that flagged her was run by someone connected to the resort ownership. If they've discovered who she really is, who her mother was, then they might try to silence her, Reeves finished. Dr. Thornton's research is still classified. If word gets out that her daughter exists, that she might have access to information. He shook his head. "We can't take that risk. And more importantly, we owe Maya the truth. We owe her the life her mother wanted for her." "Resort in sight," the pilot announced. Through the helicopter's windows, the Ashford Grand appeared below them, a sprawling complex of buildings lit up against the darkening sky like a jewel. "Take us down on the main lawn," Reeves ordered. "Make it visible. Make it dramatic. I want everyone in that resort to see us arrive." "Yes, sir." As the helicopter began its descent, Reeves thought about what Maya must have endured. Years of poverty, invisibility, abuse, all while carrying the legacy of one of the bravest women he'd ever known. That ended tonight. Maya was walking back through the penthouse suite, empty towel basket in hand, when she heard it. A distant thumping sound growing louder. Others heard it too. The music was turned down and people moved toward the windows, peering out into the night. "What is that?" someone asked. "Sounds like a helicopter," another voice replied. Maya's heart started racing for no reason she could identify. She moved with the crowd toward the massive windows overlooking the resort's front grounds. The sound was deafening now, and then she saw it. A military Black Hawk helicopter descending rapidly toward the main lawn, its searchlights cutting through the darkness like knives. The entire penthouse erupted in confused chatter. "What the hell?" Brendan said, moving to stand beside Maya at the window without even realizing it. "Who called in the military? Maybe it's a drill?" Chase suggested, though he sounded uncertain. The helicopter touched down on the perfectly manicured lawn, its rotors still spinning, creating a windstorm that bent trees and sent leaves swirling. The penthouse's outdoor furniture rattled against the concrete. 3 figures emerged from the helicopter, 2 men in military uniform and 1 woman in a formal suit. They moved with purpose, heading directly toward the resort's main entrance. "This is insane," Dylan muttered. "What's going on?" Trent had pulled out his phone and was frantically calling someone. Dad, there's a military helicopter on our lawn. What?" He paused, listening. "What do you mean you don't know? Find out." Maya stood frozen at the window, her towel basket forgotten at her feet. Something was wrong. Something was very, very wrong. The way those people moved with such intensity, such urgency, suggested this wasn't routine. Below, she could see resort staff gathered in the lobby, watching through the glass doors as the 3 figures approached. Then Mr. Patterson appeared at the penthouse service door, his face pale and confused. "Everyone," he called out, his voice cutting through the chatter. "I need—" He paused, scanning the crowd. His eyes landed on Maya. Maya Thornton. Where is she?" Maya's blood turned to ice. I'm here, sir." Every head in the room turned toward her. Patterson looked genuinely bewildered. "There are people downstairs. Military personnel, they're asking for you. By name." The room went completely silent. Maya felt dizzy. That's not possible. There must be a mistake. They have identification. They showed credentials. And they specifically asked for Maya Elizabeth Thornton, resort employee. Patterson's confusion was giving way to suspicion. "Is there something you haven't told us?" Maya couldn't speak. Her mind was spinning. Military personnel? Asking for her? It didn't make sense. Nothing made sense. Brendan's voice cut through her paralysis. Wait. The maid? They're here for the maid?" Chase started laughing, a nervous, disbelieving laugh. This has to be a joke. Some kind of prank. But Trent wasn't laughing. He was staring at Maya with an expression she couldn't read. Fear, maybe, or recognition. "Thornton," he said slowly. "Your last name is Thornton." "Yes," Maya whispered. "Dr. Elizabeth Thornton," Trent continued, his voice barely audible. "I knew that name sounded familiar, oh my God." He turned to his friends, his face now completely white. "Do you know who Elizabeth Thornton was?" "Who cares?" Dylan said dismissively. But Trent ignored him. He was still staring at Maya, and now there was something like horror in his eyes. Your mother was Dr. Elizabeth Thornton." Maya's legs felt like they might give out. "How do you—" "My father has her name on a plaque in his office," Trent said, his voice shaking now. "She saved his life, in Afghanistan, 15 years ago. He was there on a business trip when there was an attack and she—" He stopped, seeming to realize something. Oh God, what have we done? God, what have— The penthouse had erupted into chaos now, everyone talking at once, trying to understand what was happening. But Maya barely heard any of it. All she could hear was the sound of her own heartbeat, thundering in her ears as Patterson gestured urgently toward her. "They're waiting," he said. "You need to come with me, now." Maya's hands were shaking so badly she could barely move. She looked around at the faces staring at her, the wealthy guests, the servers, Brendan and his friends who had spent 2 days tormenting her, all of them looking at her like she was suddenly someone different, someone important, someone visible. "I don't understand," she managed to say. "Neither do I," Patterson admitted, "but we're about to find out." As Maya moved toward the door on unsteady legs, she passed by Brendan. Their eyes met for just a second, and what she saw there made her breath catch. Fear. He was afraid. They all were. And for the first time in 3 years, Maya Thornton felt something she hadn't felt since her mother died. Power. Maya's legs trembled as she followed Mr. Patterson through the penthouse suite. Behind her, she could hear the explosion of whispered conversations, but the words blurred together into meaningless noise. Her entire body felt numb, disconnected, like she was watching this happen to someone else. The elevator ride down was excruciating. Patterson kept glancing at her with an expression somewhere between suspicion and fear. He'd opened his mouth several times to say something, but each time he'd closed it again without speaking. Finally, as they descended past the 10th floor, he managed, "Is there anything you need to tell me, Thornton?" Maya's voice came out barely above a whisper. "I don't know what's happening. You expect me to believe that military personnel just showed up asking for you by random chance? I don't know. The words came out sharper than Maya intended, surprising both of them. She took a shaky breath. Mr. Patterson, I swear, I have no idea why they're here. I don't have any connection to the military. That wasn't entirely true, though. Her mother had served. Her mother had died overseas. But that had been 13 years ago, and Maya had been told, by the social workers, by everyone, that there was nothing left for her. No benefits, no support, no legacy beyond grief. The elevator doors opened onto the main lobby, and Maya's breath caught. The usually pristine space had been transformed into something resembling a command center. Resort staff stood pressed against the walls. Guests clustered in small groups whispering nervously. Security guards formed a loose perimeter, though they looked just as confused as everyone else. And in the center of it all stood three people who radiated authority so completely that everyone else seemed to fade into the background. The first was a man in his late 50s, tall and broad-shouldered, wearing a military dress uniform decorated with medals and insignia that Maya didn't recognize but which clearly impressed everyone present. His hair was salt and pepper, cropped short, and his dark eyes were sharp and assessing. Beside him stood a woman in her 40s, Asian American, wearing a tailored black suit. She carried a leather briefcase and had an air of quiet competence that reminded Maya painfully of her mother. The third was younger, maybe early 30s, also in uniform, a captain based on the insignia, with the coiled readiness of someone trained for combat. As Maya emerged from the elevator, all three sets of eyes locked onto her. The older man's expression shifted, softened, and he took a step forward. Maya Thornton. His voice was deep, carrying easily across the silent lobby. Maya nodded, not trusting herself to speak. He crossed the distance between them in several long strides, and then, to her complete shock, he saluted her. "Colonel Marcus Reeves, United States Army," he said formally. "It's an honor to finally meet you, Miss Thornton. I served with your mother in Afghanistan." The lobby erupted into whispers again, but Maya barely heard them. She was staring at Colonel Reeves, trying to process what he'd just said. "My mother," she repeated numbly. "Dr. Elizabeth Thornton," the woman interjected, stepping forward. "I'm Dr. Patricia Nguyen, Director of Special Operations for the Department of Defense. Your mother was one of the most brilliant surgeons I've ever had the privilege of working with. She saved countless lives, including Colonel Reeves's." Maya felt like the floor was tilting beneath her feet. I know my mother served, but she was just a field surgeon. She was far more than that," Colonel Reeves interrupted gently. "And we owe you an explanation. A long overdue explanation, but first," he glanced around at the crowd of onlookers, his expression hardening. "Is there somewhere private we can speak?" Mr. Ashford Sr. materialized from somewhere in the crowd. His face flushed. He was a large man in his 60s, wearing an expensive suit that strained slightly across his midsection. Maya had seen him around the resort but had never spoken to him directly. Of course, he said, his voice obsequious in a way Maya had never heard before. "Please use my private office this way." As they moved toward the administrative wing, Maya caught sight of the crowd that had gathered. Resort guests, staff members, all staring at her with expressions ranging from shock to confusion to something that looked almost like fear. And there, near the elevator, having apparently rushed down from the penthouse, Brendan, Chase, Dylan, and Trent, all watching with pale faces. Trent's eyes met hers, and she saw him mouth something. It looked like, "I'm sorry. Too little, too late," she thought, and felt a surge of something fierce and unfamiliar. Vindication. Mr. Ashford's office was ostentatious. Dark wood paneling, leather furniture, a massive desk that probably cost more than Maya made in a year. The walls were covered with framed photographs of Ashford with various celebrities and politicians, certificates of achievement, and, Maya's breath caught, a memorial plaque, in memory of Dr. Elizabeth Thornton, 1975-2012. Hero, healer, savior. Beneath the plaque was a photograph Maya had never seen before. Her mother, younger than Maya remembered, in military fatigues, standing in front of a field hospital tent. She was smiling, that rare, genuine smile Maya had almost forgotten. "She pulled me out of a collapsed building," Mr. Ashford said quietly, following Maya's gaze. "During a mortar attack in Kabul 15 years ago. I was there on business trying to secure contracts for construction projects. Wrong place, wrong time. Your mother. She went back into that building 3 times to evacuate the wounded. The third time, she came out carrying me. Maya couldn't speak. She'd known her mother was brave, but this was something else entirely. Colonel Reeves gestured for Maya to sit, then settled into the chair across from her. Dr. Nguyen and Captain Torres remained standing, flanking the door like guards. "Ms. Thornton," Reeves began, his voice gentle but firm, "what we're about to tell you is partially classified, but given the circumstances, you have a right to know. Your mother wasn't just a field surgeon. She was part of a special medical research program, classified Level 4, developing advanced treatments for combat trauma. Her work on rapid cellular regeneration and battlefield triage protocols has saved hundreds, possibly thousands of lives since her death." Maya's mind reeled. I never knew. They told me she was just a regular army surgeon." "That's what we wanted people to believe," Dr. Nguyen said, opening her briefcase and pulling out a thick file. "Your mother's research was groundbreaking. It's still classified because it has implications beyond military use, civilian applications that could revolutionize emergency medicine. We couldn't risk that information falling into the wrong hands." "But what does this have to do with me?" Maya asked, her voice small. Reeves and Nguyen exchanged a glance. "Before your mother died," Reeves said carefully, "she made us promise that if anything happened to her, we would ensure you were taken care of. There was a trust established, funds allocated, educational opportunities arranged. You were supposed to be protected, supported, given every advantage. But I wasn't," Maya whispered. "I went into foster care. No one came for me. I had nothing." The pain in Reeves's eyes was genuine. "We know, and that's our failure. After your mother's death, you disappeared from the system. You were using your father's surname, Jordan, living with a relative who didn't register you properly. By the time we realized what had happened, you'd aged out of foster care and vanished completely. We've been searching for you for years. Until 3 days ago," Dr. Nguyen added, "when someone ran a background check on you. A very thorough background check, the kind that triggers alerts in military databases." Maya's stomach dropped. "Who?" Mr. Ashford shifted uncomfortably. "That would have been my head of security. We run checks on all employees who have access to high-profile guests." "Bullshit," Captain Torres said bluntly, speaking for the first time. His voice was hard, uncompromising. "That check went deeper than standard employment verification. Someone was looking for something specific." Ashford's face reddened. "I assure you, we'll discuss that later," Reeves interrupted, his tone making it clear that discussion would not be pleasant. He turned back to Maya. "Ms. Thornton, there's a trust fund in your name. It's been accruing interest for 13 years. The current balance is approximately $3 million. Maya stopped breathing. "Additionally," Dr. Nguyen continued, "you're entitled to your mother's military benefits, which include full college tuition, health care, and a monthly stipend. There's also a congressional medal waiting for you. Your mother was posthumously awarded the Distinguished Service Cross. You should have received it years ago." "I don't." Maya's voice cracked. "This can't be real." "It's very real," Reeves said gently. "And there's more. Your mother's research notes. She left instructions that when you turned 25 you would gain access to her work. You're 3 years past that deadline. The information is yours, if you want it." Maya put her face in her hands. This was too much. Too overwhelming. 24 hours ago she'd been invisible, worthless. Nothing. And now? Why now? She asked, looking up. Why come here like this? The helicopter, the dramatic entrance? Reeves's expression hardened. "Because when that background check flagged in our system, we immediately investigated your current situation. We learned you were working here as a housekeeper. We learned about the..." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "Incidents you experienced. And we learned that people connected to this resort were asking questions about you. Questions that suggested they might have discovered your connection to classified research." He leaned forward. "Ms. Thornton, your mother's work is still sensitive. If hostile actors learned that her daughter existed, that you might have access to her research, you could be in danger. We needed to extract you immediately. And," his voice took on an edge, "we needed to make it very clear to anyone who might have harmed you that you are under the protection of the United States military." The implication hung in the air like a threat. Mr. Ashford looked like he might be sick. "The incidents," Maya said slowly. "You know about what happened to me here." "We do." Captain Torres's jaw was tight. "We've obtained security footage, witness statements, and social media posts that were subsequently deleted. documentation of harassment, verbal abuse, and public humiliation. That's been handled internally, Ashford stammered. My son apologized and— Your son, Reeves said, his voice dropping to something dangerous. And his associates publicly humiliated the daughter of a decorated war hero. They degraded a woman who has more right to respect than they'll ever understand. And you're telling me an apology is sufficient? Colonel, please. How many people saw it? Reeves demanded. How many guests, staff members, stood by while Maya Thornton was treated like garbage in your establishment? Ashford opened his mouth, but no sound came out. Maya sat frozen, watching this unfold. These people, these powerful, important people, were angry on her behalf. They were defending her. They saw her. After 3 years of being invisible, she was suddenly the most important person in the room. What happens now? She asked quietly. Doctor? Nguyen smiled, the first warm expression Maya had seen from her. That's entirely up to you. You can come with us tonight. We have accommodations arranged in Washington. We can help you access your funds, start the process of claiming your benefits, introduce you to your mother's colleagues. Or, Reeves added, if you prefer, we can arrange for security here while you decide what you want to do. This is your choice, Maya. Maybe the first real choice you've had in a long time. Maya looked around the office, at the plaque honoring her mother, at Mr. Ashford, who suddenly looked old and frightened, at the military personnel who'd flown here just to find her. Then she thought about the past 3 years, the humiliation, the poverty, the constant weight of being nothing to anyone. I want to leave, she said, her voice stronger than she expected. Tonight I want to go with you. Relief washed over Reeves's face. We'll collect your belongings. There's nothing worth collecting, Maya interrupted. She thought about her tiny apartment, the few clothes she owned, the broken furniture. Everything I care about I'm wearing. That wasn't quite true. She reached into her pocket and pulled out the photograph, her and her mother, standing in front of that government building. Except this, she said softly. Reeves looked at the photograph and smiled. I remember when that was taken. Congressional Medal Ceremony for Civilian Relief Workers. Your mother was nominated. She didn't win, but she didn't care. She told me the only award she needed was you. Maya's eyes filled with tears. The first tears she'd allowed herself in days. But they weren't tears of sadness. They were something else. Something that felt almost like hope. There's one more thing, she said, an idea forming. Before we leave, I need to do something. 10 minutes later, Maya walked back into the main lobby. The crowd was still there, larger now. News had spread through the resort like wildfire. Every guest, every staff member who could find an excuse to be there, had gathered to witness whatever was about to happen. Colonel Reeves, Dr. Nguyen, and Captain Torres flanked Maya as she walked to the center of the lobby. She was still wearing her housekeeping uniform, but somehow it looked different now. Or maybe she looked different wearing it. Mr. Patterson stood near the front desk, his expression confused and fearful. When Maya approached him, he actually stepped back. Mr. Patterson? Maya said, her voice carrying across the silent lobby. I'm resigning. Effective immediately. Patterson blinked. You? What? I'm resigning, Maya repeated. I won't be returning to work. Not tomorrow, not ever. She pulled her name tag from her uniform and set it on the front desk. The small plastic rectangle looked insignificant, meaningless. She'd worn it for 3 years and no one had ever bothered to read it. Then she turned to face the crowd. Brendan, Chase, Dylan, and Trent stood near the elevator. All 4 of them looked like they'd aged years in the past hour. Trent was pale, his hands shaking. Brendan couldn't meet her eyes. Chase and Dylan just stared at the floor. Maya walked toward them and the crowd parted like water. When she stopped in front of the 4 men, Reeves and Torres positioned themselves on either side of her. Not threatening, but their presence was unmistakable. 2 days ago, Maya said quietly, but her voice carried in the silent lobby. You called me nothing. You said I was invisible. You humiliated me because you could, because you thought there would be no consequences. Brendan finally looked up, his face anguished. Maya, You were right about one thing, Maya continued, cutting him off. I was invisible. But not because I was nothing. I was invisible because I'd forgotten who I was, because I'd let the world make me small. She took a breath, feeling the weight of her mother's legacy settling around her shoulders. Not as a burden, but as armor. My mother was Dr. Elizabeth Thornton. She was brilliant, brave, and compassionate. She saved lives in war zones. She developed medical treatments that are still saving lives today. And she taught me, before she died, that dignity isn't given by others. It's something you carry inside yourself. Maya's voice grew stronger. I lost that for a while. I let people like you convince me I was worthless. But standing here now, I realize something. The only people in this room who should be ashamed are the ones who treated other human beings like they were disposable. Trent's face crumpled. I'm sorry, he whispered. God, Maya, I'm so sorry. If I'd known, you shouldn't have needed to know, Maya said simply. I deserved basic human respect regardless of who my mother was. Every person who works in this building deserves that. But you didn't see us as people. You saw us as servants, as things. She glanced around at the watching crowd, at the other housekeepers, servers, kitchen staff who'd witnessed her humiliation. They were watching her now with expressions of awe and something that looked like vicarious triumph. I'm not angry anymore, Maya said, surprised to realize it was true. I'm grateful, because you showed me exactly who you are, and you showed me who I'm not. She turned to leave, then paused and looked back at Brendan. For what it's worth, she said, I hope you learn from this. I hope someday you understand that power without empathy is just cruelty. And cruelty always has consequences. Brendan nodded, tears streaming down his face. I'm sorry, he managed. I'm so sorry. Maya didn't respond. There was nothing left to say. She walked away, following Colonel Reeves and Dr. Nguyen toward the entrance. Captain Torres brought up the rear, his hand resting casually on his service weapon, a subtle but clear message to anyone watching. As they reached the doors, Carla pushed through the crowd. Mija, she said, her eyes shining with tears. You're really leaving? Maya hugged her, the first real human contact she'd had in longer than she could remember. I have to, but thank you, Carla, for seeing me when no one else did. You call me, Carla demanded, pressing a piece of paper into Maya's hand. You call me and tell me you're okay. I will, Maya promised. Outside, the helicopter waited on the lawn, its rotors beginning to spin up. Maya paused at the threshold, turning back for one last look at the Ashford Grand Resort. The building gleamed in the darkness, beautiful and cold. Through the windows, she could see the faces watching her leave, shocked, awed, afraid. She thought about the girl who'd arrived here 3 years ago, broken and alone, willing to accept any scrap of kindness, any promise of stability. That girl was gone. In her place stood someone new, someone who remembered what it meant to be Dr. Elizabeth Thornton's daughter. Ready? Colonel Reeves asked gently. Maya nodded. I'm ready. They walked across the lawn together, the grass soft beneath Maya's feet, the night air cool against her skin. As she climbed into the helicopter, she caught one last glimpse of the penthouse windows. 4 silhouettes stood there, watching her leave. 4 men who'd thought they had all the power, who'd learned too late that true power had nothing to do with money or privilege. The helicopter lifted off, and Maya felt the ground drop away beneath her. She was rising, ascending, leaving behind everything that had weighed her down. Below, the Ashford Grand Resort grew smaller and smaller until it was just another building in an endless landscape of lights. Your mother would be proud of you, Dr. Nguyen said softly, sitting beside her. Maya looked at the photograph in her hands, her mother's smile captured forever in that frozen moment. I hope so, she whispered. As the helicopter turned toward Washington, Maya leaned back in her seat and closed her eyes. For the first time in 13 years, she felt like she was going home. 3 months later, Maya Thornton stood in front of a floor-to-ceiling window in a Georgetown townhouse, watching the sun rise over Washington, D.C. The city spread out before her like a promise. Monuments gleaming in the early light, the Potomac River winding through the landscape like a silver ribbon. She barely recognized herself anymore. The hollow-eyed girl in the threadbare uniform was gone. In her place stood a woman in comfortable jeans and a cashmere sweater. Simple clothes, but well-made, bought without having to check price tags. Her hair, no longer pulled back in that tight, punishing bun, fell in natural curls around her shoulders. She'd gained weight, healthy weight, and the permanent tension that had lived in her shoulders for 3 years had finally begun to ease. The townhouse belonged to her now, purchased with funds from her mother's trust. It wasn't ostentatious, but it was hers. A home, not just a place to survive. Behind her, on the dining room table that had become her workspace, sat stacks of her mother's research files. Colonel Reeves had delivered them personally 2 weeks after Maya arrived in Washington, along with a team of medical researchers who'd spent hours explaining Dr. Elizabeth Thornton's groundbreaking work. Maya had read every page, studying her mother's notes late into the night. The brilliant mind that had shaped those words, the compassionate heart that had driven that research, it was all there, preserved in careful handwriting and clinical observations. And Maya had finally understood. Her mother hadn't just saved lives. She'd changed medicine itself. The doorbell rang, interrupting her thoughts. Maya checked her watch. 7:30 a.m., right on time. She opened the door to find Dr. Patricia Nguyen standing there with 2 cups of coffee and a warm smile. "Morning," Patricia said, handing Maya one of the cups. "Ready for your big day?" Maya took a steadying breath. "As ready as I'll ever be." Today she was meeting with representatives from Johns Hopkins University. They'd offered her a full scholarship to their medical school, not because of who her mother was, but because Maya had scored in the 98th percentile on her entrance exams. 3 months of intensive studying, of rediscovering the intellectual curiosity she'd buried under years of survival, had revealed something Maya had forgotten. She was brilliant, too. "Your mother would be so proud," Patricia said softly, as they settled onto the couch. "I wish she could see this," Maya admitted. "I wish I could tell her I finally understand what she tried to teach me, that I'm worth more than how people treat me." "She knows," Patricia assured her. "And Maya, you're not just following in her footsteps. You're creating your own path." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment before Patricia pulled out her tablet. "I thought you should see this before your meeting. It went public yesterday." She turned the screen toward Maya. The headline read, "Ashford Resort Faces Federal Investigation Following Employee Abuse Allegations." Maya's heart skipped. "What happened?" "After you left, several other employees came forward with their own stories," Patricia explained. "Harassment, wage theft, discrimination. The Department of Labor opened an investigation. And then," she scrolled down, "3 of the 4 men who harassed you found themselves facing consequences." The article detailed everything. Brendan Calloway's family investment firm had dropped him from their board after the story broke, citing behavior incompatible with company values. Chase Harrington had been forced to resign from his position at a tech startup when employees threatened to walk out if he remained. Dylan Mercer's trust fund had been frozen by his grandmother, who'd been horrified to learn how he'd treated service workers. And Trent Ashford Jr., his father had publicly disowned him, removing him from any leadership position at the resort and cutting off his financial support. "They destroyed their own futures," Maya said quietly. "They destroyed their reputations," Patricia corrected. "Their futures depend on whether they learn from this. Some people do, some don't." Maya thought about that. She didn't feel satisfaction exactly, or vindication, just a quiet sense that justice, real, meaningful justice, had been served. "There's something else," Patricia continued, pulling up another article. "The resort is being sold. Mr. Ashford Sr. is retiring. The new owners have committed to complete reform, better wages, workplace protections, employee advocacy programs." Maya's eyes widened. "Because of what happened to me, because of what you had the courage to speak about, because you refused to be invisible anymore." Patricia squeezed Maya's hand. "You changed things, Maya, for everyone who works there, for everyone who will work there in the future." That afternoon, after her meeting with Johns Hopkins, which had gone better than Maya could have hoped, she took a walk through Arlington National Cemetery. She'd been here once before, for her mother's funeral 13 years ago, but she barely remembered it. She'd been 15, lost in grief, unable to process what was happening. Now she found her mother's grave easily. The headstone was simple, elegant. Dr. Elizabeth Thornton Major, U.S. Army Medical Corps, 1975-2012. Beloved mother, hero, healer. Maya knelt beside the grave, placing a bouquet of white roses on the grass. For a long moment, she didn't speak. She just sat there, feeling the autumn sun on her face, listening to the wind move through the trees. "I'm sorry it took me so long to find my way back," she finally said. "I got lost for a while. I forgot who I was, who you raised me to be." A breeze rustled the leaves and Maya smiled through her tears. "But I remember now, Mama. I remember everything you taught me. About dignity, about standing up, about never letting anyone make you small." She touched the headstone gently. "I'm going to medical school. I'm going to continue your work. Not because I'm trying to live up to your legacy, but because I finally understand this is my calling too." She stayed there for another hour, telling her mother about everything. The past 3 years, the helicopter, the moment she'd walked out of that resort with her head held high. She talked about her plans, her hopes, her dreams that were finally within reach. When she finally stood to leave, she felt lighter than she had in years. "I love you, Mama," she whispered. "Thank you for never giving up on me, even when I gave up on myself." 6 months later, Maya sat in a lecture hall at Johns Hopkins, surrounded by other first-year medical students. The professor was discussing trauma surgery protocols, territory Maya knew well from reading her mother's research. When the professor asked a complex question about rapid cellular response, Maya's hand shot up automatically. She answered clearly, confidently, citing recent studies and her mother's foundational work. The professor's eyebrows rose. "Excellent analysis, Ms. Thornton. Your mother's research, I assume?" "Yes, sir," Maya said proudly. "Dr. Elizabeth Thornton was my mother." She said it without shame, without hesitation, not hiding behind that legacy but honoring it. After class, several students approached her with questions, wanting to discuss Dr. Thornton's work. Maya found herself at the center of an engaged intellectual conversation, the kind she'd dreamed about but never thought she'd experience. This was where she belonged, not in the shadows, not invisible, here, in the light. That evening, Maya video called Carla, who answered with a huge smile. "Mija, how's medical school?" "Exhausting and amazing," Maya laughed. "How are things at the resort?" "So much better," Carla said. "The new owners actually care about us. Better pay, better treatment." And Maya, her eyes filled with tears. "They named the Employee Wellness Center after you, the Maya Thornton Center for Worker Dignity." Maya's breath caught. "They what?" "They said you changed everything, that your courage inspired them to build something better." Carla wiped her eyes. "You're a hero, Mija, just like your mother." After they hung up, Maya sat in her townhouse living room, processing this. The girl who'd been invisible, who'd cleaned floors and accepted abuse because she thought she had no choice. That girl had somehow changed an entire system, not through wealth or power or connections, through simple, stubborn dignity, through refusing to accept that being treated badly was inevitable, through standing up and saying, "I am worth more than this." A year after leaving the Ashford Grand Resort, Maya received an unexpected letter. The return address made her pause. Brendan Calloway. She almost threw it away, but curiosity won. Inside was a handwritten note. "Dear Maya, I know I have no right to contact you. I know nothing I say can undo what I did, but I wanted you to know that I've spent the past year in therapy, working to understand why I thought it was acceptable to treat another human being the way I treated you. I've lost everything. My career, my family's trust, most of my friends, and I deserve to lose it all. What I didn't deserve was the grace you showed me that night. You could have destroyed me completely. Instead, you told me I could learn from this. I'm trying to. I've started volunteering at a homeless shelter. I'm learning what it means to serve others without expecting anything in return. I'm learning to see people, really see them, regardless of their circumstances. I don't expect forgiveness. I just wanted you to know that your words changed me. You were right. Power without empathy is just cruelty. I'm trying to become someone who understands that. Thank you for teaching me what my privilege never could." Brendan. Maya read the letter twice, then carefully filed it away. She didn't know if Brendan's transformation was genuine or permanent. People didn't change overnight, and good intentions didn't erase harm done. But it was something. A beginning, maybe. And beginnings mattered. 5 years later, Maya Thornton stood in a hospital corridor, wearing scrubs and a white coat with her name embroidered on the pocket. She'd just finished a 14-hour surgery, successfully treating a patient with complex trauma injuries, using techniques her mother had pioneered. Her hands were steady. Her mind was clear. Her mother's legacy lived on through her work, but it was Maya's own skill, her own dedication that had saved that patient's life. As she walked through the hospital, she passed orderlies, janitors, cafeteria workers, and she did something that had become second nature. She looked them in the eyes. She learned their names. She said thank you, because she remembered what it felt like to be invisible, and she'd sworn she would never let anyone else feel that way if she could help it. That evening, she received a call from Colonel Reeves. "Congratulations, Dr. Thornton," he said warmly. "I heard about your surgery today. Brilliant work." "Thank you, Colonel. Your mother would be so proud." "I'm proud." Maya smiled. "I couldn't have done any of this without you, without everyone who came for me that night. We just reminded you of who you already were," Reeves said. "The courage was always yours, Maya. You just needed to remember it." After they hung up, Maya stood at her apartment window, a different apartment now in a different city. but the view was just as beautiful. She thought about the journey that had brought her here, about the girl who'd scrubbed floors and accepted cruelty because she thought she had no other choice. That girl had been wrong. She'd always had a choice. She just needed to be reminded of her own worth. Maya touched the photograph in her pocket, still there after all these years, a little more worn but still precious. Her mother's smile looked back at her, frozen in that moment of joy and pride. "We did it, Mama," Maya whispered. "We found our way home." Outside her window, the city lights twinkled like stars, full of endless possibility, and Maya Thornton, no longer invisible, no longer afraid, stepped forward into her beautiful, hard-won life with her head held high and her mother's courage burning bright in her heart. The world had tried to make her small, but she had remembered finally and completely that she was born to be extraordinary, not because of wealth or privilege or power, but because she was her mother's daughter, and that had always been enough.